Michigan Soccer Central.
Heyo, thank you for pressing play on the latest edition of the Michigan Soccer Central podcast, your weekly dip into the world's game being played right here in the Great Lakes state of Michigan. How's it going? My name's Robert Kerr, your host as always, back after an unusual, unprecedented delay due to scheduling and plenty of illness. We missed out last week, and this week is a little bit later on in the calendar, but a great show as always ahead. We've got Detroit news sports writer Nolan Bianchi on the podcast to talk about the upcoming Detroit City FC season, as well as what's transpired and what is about to happen in the off season. Lots of stuff has been happening in Michigan soccer since we last chatted. If you go over to @MI Soccer Central on all social media platforms, you will see we are continuing our Michigan soccer recruit player profile for those ambitious players looking to get to the next level. You go there, there is lots of players going up there. Special shout out, another Western Michigan player going pro, joining forward Madison, WMU alum Eric Connerty. So congratulations, a shout out to Eric. Those Broncos, had an amazing run, and they are getting rewarded with some professional looks. Shout out to Amalia Villarreal. She announced a few weeks ago she's going to go to Texas for her college commitment, but also she got called up for youth women's national teams. They're going to be going to the UK to play a series of friendlies. So congratulations on her continued call-ups to the youth national team. Another big piece of news was the release of the Midwest Premier League's conference alignment with, I think, 18 teams based in Michigan joining the making up two different divisions in the Great Lakes Conference of the Midwest Premier League, making the Midwest Premier League the biggest footprint in elite amateur soccer here in the Great Lakes state. So that is an interesting turn of events. For all those updates, including the team of the week, go to @MI Soccer Central on all social media platforms. Stay tuned in right now, though, because we got a great conversation with Detroit news sports writer Nolan Bianchi here on the Michigan Soccer Central podcast. Welcome back. Next up here on Michigan Soccer Central podcast, the Detroit City FC preseason kicks off in earnest this weekend. So I've invited my favorite Detroit news sports writer back onto the program to talk about Detroit City FC, how their offseason's been, maybe a little bit of a thought as to how the second USL Championship offseason has gone. Without further ado, Nolan Bianchi, welcome back to Michigan Soccer Central podcast. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, Robert. It's good to see you. We went through, I feel like we're kind of coming to the end of winter, but once Detroit City FC starts, that's always a harsh reminder how far away from warm weather we actually are, because we get out there and it's freezing and it's windy and it's rainy. And I'm just looking forward to being out on the pitch and on a summer night in June. That's all I can really think about at this point.
You're talking about cold weather games. I got a kind of a throwback. I've seen the game versus Columbus last year. I think the Open Cup put out the video from that Columbus game last year. It was in March or April, and I remember my tweeting hand was frozen that night.
Yes, that was the case for a lot of those early games where I couldn't even, because they don't really have a press box at Keyworth Stadium. They have a press box, but not like a working press box. And so the media sits in a little tent outside, and they were just for the first, I would say, month and a half of the season, all my stories were like, all right, I'm going to get in the car, get some heat kicking, and then I'll write my story and then I'll submit it instead of just submitting it from there. But definitely looking forward to that starting to turn a little bit here, and hopefully we have some early season nice weather for the boys. I know they are obviously going to be out on the West Coast for the first couple games, so that'll be nice for both us and them.
For listeners unfamiliar, last year Nolan really produced some fantastic coverage and really did his dues covering Detroit City FC in their first year in the USL Championship. Really did the beat writer role, and then actually got some great deep dive stories. Really got some good background about coach and various players throughout the season. Really, did a traditional beat writer at a mainstream newspaper. It was really well received and some great coverage. You were on a couple times last year, and we were shoulder to shoulder doing a lot of post-game interviews together. So I'm very glad to touch base with you again as preseason kicks off. And so I said this was the second USL Championship off-season, and really the first full one, as it was a bit of an unconventional transfer from Nice to USL Championship last time out. So as preseason gets underway, what can you say about Detroit City's offseason?
Well, I hate to take a cop out word here, but the word I would use to describe it is interesting, right? Because last offseason, you just alluded to it, they make the jump from Nisa to USL Championship, and they do so with a lot of Nisa players. Obviously, that is how they end up with the nickname, the Nisa All Stars. And they find a lot of success. I mean, so, you look at kind of what went on with the roster turnover this past offseason. You say, okay, the back line is back and maybe even reinforced probably once Devin Amumensa comes back from his injury, maybe even better than they were last year, having that other year of experience under their belts. So you're looking at that half being like, okay, that part's good. They re-signed Nate Steinwasser. And then Antoine leaves. And you're like, okay, that's whatever. He was a good player, but they're gonna have to find the replacement of production for that. And then Pato leaves, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, that's two of the top scorers. That might be a little bit concerning. And then Declan leaves, who was their most productive defensive player of the season. So you're kind of looking at it going, okay, is this team going to regress a little next year? Because I feel like it would be common sense to say, well, they lost all this production. Even if they are able to replace it, it might take a little bit longer to mesh. But I don't know. I still feel pretty optimistic that they're going to take another step forward next year, because like I just alluded to, they made that step with all Nisa players. And yeah, they're not getting the best players out there. The signings that were announced over the summer weren't exactly awe-inducing, frenzy-inducing on Twitter. There was none of those days like, holy crap, they got this guy or whatever. But I think what you are going to see this next season is Trevor James scouting at work, only this time he's able to get guys from a little bit higher of a level. So instead of taking guys from Nisa and putting them in USL Championship and saying, hey, let's see if you can do this, he's getting guys who, some of them have very, very limited experience, maybe not great runs of form playing in USL Championship, but they still have played at the level. They know what it's like. And so I don't know. I feel like you're kind of coming into this with half the team being a complete unknown, and yet I still think that there's reasons to be optimistic about it.
The reasons to be optimistic, I'm going to ask, is from my perspective. Last year, I'd say by the end of the year, you were kind of grasping at straws as to where the goals were going to come from. And then Hopino, you said, left, and he was one of the few sparks that created goal chances and goals themselves. He leaves. So for a team that kind of, in my opinion, needed to add more of a goal threat, have they done so?
I don't know, and that's the big question. That's the big unknown, because a lot of these guys haven't been super productive like elsewhere. There's Cy Goddard, who came over at the end of last season, didn't play a whole lot. He got stuck where he was for a little bit because of visa issues. He'll be back this year, so I think he's definitely a candidate to maybe take one of the more ownership, I guess, of the offense, you could say. You got Yazid Matthews coming back. I think that was huge. I think at times maybe it was a little, I don't want to say underestimated how badly they missed him. But when he came back, his impact was immediate, and you really felt like they got a boost from him coming back. And then I would say on the front end, I mean, like it's all kind of up in the air. They got all these new guys. In going into last preseason, we kind of thought Francis Atuane was going to be like a critical piece for this team. He obviously suffers the injury, but I think there's so much to be played out on this forward group over the next couple of weeks. I think it's 30 days until the home opener now at this point. So I think that's going to be kind of what I'm watching, is who emerges from this training camp as kind of the regulars in the starting 11 up front.
And so from my notes, new signings, obviously there was returners, and there were some key guys came back, lost some key players. They got one defenseman and three midfielders. Are there any guys out of that new group of new fresh faces, new to Detroit, that you especially are kind of excited for, see what they might bring, if there's any kind of a different dynamic that might be brought from some of these new faces?
Yeah, so I think like Skage Simonson is going to be a really interesting guy, and then I don't know if you heard, but they kind of over the weekend there was a report that leaked they had signed a former Ipswich Town player. He came up through the Ipswich Town Youth Academy, where Trevor James kind of got his start both as a player and a coach. I was able to confirm that, so I think that's kind of maybe the guy that like I was waiting for them to sign. Really, is like that true number 9. Who can play up front and kind of finish off goals and be like that true striker that they didn't really have last season.
So that's interesting. So there is a striker on the book. So DCFC fans won't be left without a new face leading the front line.
Yeah, I think if there's a signing that will get people excited, like before the season starts, like that's probably going to be the one. He doesn't have a whole lot of professional experience. I think since 2017, he has played just like 45 total games as a pro. Only ended up making 4 appearances for Ipswich, but he has some experience with the U17, U18, U19 English national teams. And then he apparently is, and I haven't been able to find proof of this, but apparently he has played really, really well for, the U23 Ipswich team. So I think like of all the guys, he's 23, he signed here as a free agent. I think of all the guys who, kind of have, I would say, nothing to lose, like the biggest upside, he's probably the one.
So he's 23, has played 45 professional matches. So he has a professional pedigree, but hasn't necessarily bloomed as a pro just yet. So he could be treating this step to Detroit as a place to blow up, so to speak.
Definitely. And I haven't been able to confirm the contract details yet either, so I don't know how many years it is. Most of their deals, if I were to guess or speculate, and don't take this as fact, but most of their deals I feel like end up being the first year guaranteed with a club option for the second year. If I were to guess, I would say though that's his contract, but I feel like with a guy like him, even though there is a bit of a gamble to it, maybe they gave him 2 years guaranteed, and they can take a chance at trying to sell him next offseason if he does have that blow up year. Or I guess with the club option they could ultimately do that anyways. But in theory, I guess that's how that works, right?
From my experience reading the press releases, most of the contracts seem like a 1-and-1. But if it's somebody, I imagine if it's somebody that they truly believe in, they might have gone 2-and-1 or something like that.
Yeah,
but that's very interesting. Nolan bringing the signing scoop. You're our own Fabrizio here.
Yeah, well, I've been playing a lot of FIFA lately, and I started on the 4th division, and I've had to work my way up, and that's what I've been doing. I've been signing guys out of training, then I sell them. So, I'm not saying in any way that is what the team intends to do with him, but if you're looking at players with upside who could ultimately bring value to the squad outside of what they're producing on the field, he's definitely a guy with that kind of potential, in my opinion.
So Ipswich, looking them up, they are in the third tier in England, sitting in third place, the top playoff spot. So there's going to be some quality on that side of the transfer. And so if he was having a little bit of a hard time breaking into that first team, be interesting to see where he slots in once that does become official. I'm sure anyone coming over from the UK will get a little bit of buzz. Anyone outside, I mean, because it seems like a lot of the free agent goal scorers within the USL Championship kind of seem like they've been sewn up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the names that I know were floated around as um, wish list sort of players have kind of been sewn up. So I was getting a little worried. Now, from what I've scanned of City Twitter, there's a little bit of anxiety as far as signings. So I wonder, do you think that this mystery player that's about to be announced here soon, you think he'll maybe calm those nerves?
I would think so, and you just brought it up. Like anybody who comes over from England, I think is ultimately going to be somebody that draws a lot of excitement. And again, like I feel the way I feel about Trevor James is I feel, cross sport analogy here, the way a lot of people feel about Steve Yzerman, where it's like, okay, we'll trust the process. Like I trust the process with Trevor James because, like I just said, yeah, he may not have been able to crack the Ipswich Town, starting lineup, but there were guys from Devin Amumento was playing on the Michigan Stars last year, and there was very real thought that he might go to MLS this summer if he didn't have that injury. He was that good for them, and he did show that much upside for them. So I think when it comes to just what Trevor's track record has been with bringing in players who are maybe a little bit just needed a change of scenery or something along those lines and completely revitalizing them, I think has to be encouraging. Like how many, and you can correct me on this, but like how many players that came into this DCFC team were like, holy crap, they got this guy right off the jump. I would find it hard to imagine that a lot of them were. Maxi Rodriguez was almost out of soccer. Antoine Hopino was basically out of soccer. And so, I don't know. It ultimately, to me, and like I get the panic of like they were a fringe playoff team. They seem to have lost pieces. Or not they seem to have lost pieces. They have lost, a lot of their production from a year ago. And so it might take some time to figure out, but I do believe that like in the end there will be enough to at least be as good as last year's team, if not better. And I don't want to go out on a limb and say they are going to be better than last year's team, but like if you just look at what I mentioned with the back line and the goaltending all coming back, and I don't see any reason why they can't be as good as last year's team and why they can't reproduce the production they got up front, which was not a whole lot, if we're being honest.
Yeah, if there was a coach that could unearth a diamond in the rough and a team that could display that diamond in the rough, you'd say it was Trevor James and Detroit City FC. Throwing back to that Columbus game, I remember asking Coach James, like, Maxi Rodriguez, because that was one of his marquee performances of the whole season. Like,
yeah,
this guy
who
really acknowledged, bounced around USL, kind of looked like he was weighing his options in or out of soccer. And then, he was the star man in that game beating the MLS side. And, if there's anyone to unearth a diamond, so this forward might just be, hopefully, another one of those.
But he could also be another Francis Atuahene, where he blows everybody's minds in preseason, and you're like, holy crap, this former MLS draft pick, he's ready to finally explode, and then he just never finds it, and that's the way sports go. But I think, especially with like the MO of Trevor's teams in years past, like I think that's a special reason to maybe I guess not panic is the fact that like it's not like the MO of a Trevor James team has been like this, explosive offense and all this goal scoring. Like what they are looking to produce is not as much as other teams would be looking to produce, I guess, on that front. And maybe not saying that they're not trying to score as much, but maybe they just value play in other area of the field more so than, just trying to boat race everybody, every week.
Yeah, and it's not really that kind of a league. If you saw San Antonio last year, the way they played was significantly different than a lot of teams played, and that was bruising guys and just enough quality up at the front to take care of business. It was definitely a defense first. I mean, but then they had the quality. Eventually, as the season progressed, that quality obviously bared fruit. But it wouldn't say that you wouldn't say that this league was won by guys that could dribble through an entire team.
No, definitely. And like I still think that, if you look at the guys who are coming back, like Maxi Rodriguez can score goals from the midfield position. Michael Bryant, will be everywhere on the pitch by just the second month of the season. He'll probably have every position played under his belt. Connor Rutt's coming back. Didn't have the best luck last year. Had a kind of lot of bad luck at the beginning of the year. I think he had like 5 point something expected goals before he got his first one. So maybe a little regression to the mean for him as well on that front.
Local guy, Connor Rutz, and then Gasso, he gets signed,
Yep.
19-year-old, another Southeast Michigan guy. And so there are some local ties to the team that can get there's definitely like a set of fans of any team that root for those hometown guys. You have some of your favorites. I was actually a little bit surprised. Steinwasser coming back. That's huge. I didn't notice if there was a backup keeper signed just yet, so that's something to keep an eye on, in my opinion. And then 3 new midfielders, a new defender. Getting Amu Mensah back is almost like a new signing in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And and then in this new forward that we've been chattering on about, definitely what is there enough of a change to where it's not the same old crew. And then there's still a little bit of time. I mean, I think they added players throughout the season as it went, but obviously you want your team, just about assembled before the season kicks off. And as we are heading into the weekend, Detroit City have 4 preseason friendlies coming up in the next 12 days or so. Here in Michigan, they're playing Oakland University behind closed doors, going out to Arizona, playing New Mexico, and then Grand Canyon. And then on the 21st, they're playing out in Brighton, and the Pittsburgh Riverhounds are coming out for a friendly there too. So it's all starting here, and it's wild to think that marathon season we talked about at the end of the year when you hopped on. I think that was in October or so. We're here nearing the beginning of that marathon once again.
Yeah, no doubt. And like I said, I'm really excited to see what all these guys, what all these new guys add. I'm excited to see just how different the team is this year, because half of it's going to be the same, half of it's going to be drastically different. And how do the guys who are returning from last year help fill in those cracks? I think of guys like Michael Bryant and Matt Lewis, and guys who weren't always at the forefront of. Well, I guess Michael Bryant was. He became quite a fan favorite by the end of the season there. But just guys who, aren't necessarily putting up the crazy counting stats, but are just so reliable for you. And I think that like on a year-to-year basis, like those are things you can count on. This guy they brought in, Adrian Billhart, like he's a really interesting guy. Midfielder who comes from League One. Like he's another guy who he hasn't played at the level before, but also he was playing at a level higher than Nisa. I guess I can't fully speak to how different Nisa is from USL League One, but I would imagine it's pretty drastic. Maybe not as much as Nisa to USL Championship, but I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that off base there or what?
I think that with what we saw with results, not only in Detroit, but in elsewhere, I think the difference between Championship, League One, and NISA, I think it went team to team rather than league to league. I think it's almost the league differentiation is more of a investment based than quality based. I'm sure there's trends that USL Championship obviously at the top end, and there's certain teams that definitely much higher quality. But I don't think with the way that the American soccer system is set up, I don't think you can blanketly just say League One is 100% lower or higher than anything else.
Interesting. Okay. You would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've asked people before, like, what's the difference in leagues, and basically investment is what the answer generally boils down to. Um, is there any other notes about the off season or what we might see coming up here?
So I do want to just touch a little bit more on this Adrian Billhart guy because I went back to the story I wrote about him. It is actually a pretty, while it wasn't necessarily received to be at the time, it actually is kind of a pretty exciting signing. So from USL Tactics last year, he was 93rd percentile in goals above replacement. He was 94th percentile in expected assists, 79th percentile in expected goals, 94th in key passes / forward passes. So like the I'm really intrigued to see what they do with this new run of forwards because I felt like at the end of the day, what they got from those guys was exactly replacement level, right? Yes, they lost that production, but was it abnormally good production? No, it was. I would argue it was either exactly replacement level or just below replacement level, and so. No other notes, but I do want to just reiterate like how interesting this new front is going to be. And while we've spent all this time talking about how are they going to replace the production, there's a chance this booms. There's a chance that this offense looks really, really good next year. And all of a sudden they have two really good halves of the field. And they can legitimately become a contender in the USL Championship. Because that was the thing that ultimately did them in last year was even – I would say from like the last third of the season on, you kind of just before that, even though you're kind of tempering the expectations, you're like, well, maybe they could do something. And then September rolls around, and you're like, this team just can't score when it needs to, and it is what it is. So I think that out of everything is what I'm looking for heading into this next season. Can this team get goals when it needs to turn draws into wins and losses into draws? How many times did they lose games like that last season, especially in that final month or two when they were giving up I think it was like their last 3 games they gave up 2 goals within a span of 3 minutes, and then they did it in the Memphis game, and it was like, oh yep, we saw that for the last month, and it showed up at its worst time. So I think having another year, having so many guys who are playing in their second level in the league will be really exciting too. And when it's not as fresh and new for everybody, when we're not constantly, being reminded or reminding people ourselves that it's their inaugural USL Championship season, and I'm really interested to see kind of where it goes.
Yeah, heightened expectations for the second year, no doubt, and then that's why. Before on the doorstep of a new season is one of the most exciting times. Like, who's going to step up? Who's going to step back? Who's going to be, the unexpected surprise? Very exciting. And who knows? This is where any team can dream of. This could be
Hope
our
springs
championship
eternal.
year. Yeah,
Hope
exactly.
springs
Can you
eternal.
tell the listeners where to find your fantastic coverage, Nolan?
Yeah, you can find me at the DetroitNews.com. You can find me on Twitter at Nolan Bianchi. I think that's pretty much it. Back when I was like a freelancer, I used to have to run through like 7 different like organizations of like, if you want to find me writing about hockey, go here. But no, just the Detroit News and on Twitter at Nolan Bianchi.
Nolan, thank you so much for joining us and spending so much time with me here on Michigan Soccer Central Podcast.
Of course. Thanks, Robert.
Hey guys, this is Zoo from Michigan Soccer Central, one of your co-hosts covering all soccer in Michigan, from amateur to professional, men's to women's. I'd just like to take a little bit of time to talk about Anchor, which is the service that we're using to produce our podcast. It's a free service that you can find online or in the App Store. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor distributes the podcast, so something really cool there to go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other services. So you don't have to worry about distributing it yourself. And you can make money from these podcasts. So there's no minimum listenership, and you can activate those sponsorships on there. All in one place, it's everything you need. So all you need to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Thanks.
Big thanks to my guest this week, Nolan Bianchi, sports writer for the Detroit News, bringing some scoops and some news about the off-season and the forthcoming Detroit City FC season. Preseason kicking off here this weekend. Exciting times. I'm glad to see that soccer is starting to come back in earnest, the outdoor variety that is. Thanks to all the guests that have come on the Michigan Soccer Central podcast as we are storming towards the 100th episodes. We're, I believe, at episode 96. So the Centurion episode of the podcast coming sooner, week by week. Special thanks go to Jenny Hajnaki for editing the program as always. Thanks to the listener. Thank you guys, obviously, and thank you to the Michigan Soccer Central core team. Without you guys, this show does not go. So until next time, everybody, please enjoy your soccer.